Well, here we go. So this is a project I did for the first time because I wanted to learn how to carve. And this is my story and how I got to it. So I think we've all been here. It was a project you wanted to make and you had no idea how to do it. I know I faced that many times, and actually those are the kind of projects I like to do. I don't do too many projects twice. I do a lot of projects for the first time and move on to something else. And that's the challenge I was faced in this project. I saw this table a number of years ago. I can't remember, it was either in Fine Woodworking or the Mazda article or something, and I just thought it was beautiful. It's a pie crust tea table made in the shop of Robert Walker a long time ago. It's displayed at Mazda. That's the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts. And I love the detail of the edge of it. And I really like the size, the overall size. I like the height of the feet and the breadth of the feet, which you don't see on very many tea tables today. And I'll show you an example of that later, I think. But I had no idea how you do this. I didn't ever really think I'd do this table. I didn't know how to start, if I could even do it, and I never thought I'd try. So I went on and read the next article and did something else. Well, I learned and I made one. So that's my table on the right, and that's a Robert Walker table on the left. Robert Walker had a better piece of wood. That's a beautiful piece of wood he has, and they have better studio lighting to take their picture than I did on my Apple phone. But it looks a lot like the Robert Walker table. So it sits in my office. I see it every day, and I just enjoy looking at it every day. It gives me lots of pleasure. And that's why you make things, so you can enjoy it. And it's a project, as I said, I never thought I would take on. I'm glad I did. I enjoy it. I would encourage you all to do the same. And carving isn't that complicated. The gist of, I know that sounds like a funny thing to say. Gary, can you shoot this? Can you see that edge? Well, you can kind of see a little bit of it. There you go. You can see that little shoulder edge there. Carving is simply cutting an edge with one chisel, like a V chisel, and using other chisels to take out a little bit. You only take out a 1/16, an inch or something like that. And you do that around this pattern, and you create a table that looks like this. That's what it's all about. The most difficult thing to learn is it's just like using a plane. You've got to go downhill and cross. If you start going uphill with chisels, it will be just like using a plane. You'll grab into a hook and get tear out and that sort of thing. But it's truly, it's not that complicated. And it's something anyone can learn, and I would encourage you all to make an effort to do so. Even something simple. So meanwhile, back to the slideshow. And that's the finished table. You don't ever see these parts. You see the table when you walk in, but the details that I poured over, I'm down here measuring millimeters on these leg carvings, and no one ever sees it. If you walk in the room, you'll see the table tilted like it is at the top. You never see the bird cage. You never see the pedestal carving. You don't really see the feet unless you look down to it, but that's what the table parts look like when you get up close. And I'll go ahead and pass this around. This is a sample of the table I made. I didn't get it quite as finesse in terms of scraping out the top. I just trying to see if I could get the pattern right. So I pass that around, and this is about what the real table looks like. This is just a sample segment that I practiced, and when I did that, I finally said, I think I can make the table. And part of my logic was, if I could carve the top, I could figure out how to make the rest of it. But if I couldn't carve the top, there wasn't any need to try to carve feet or anything like that. So I did so. So here's how I went about the project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these things. First of all, find your project. Carving always was something I found fascinating. I love stone sculpture. I always thought I'd love to do some sculpture. I didn't think that'll ever happen. Don't think it ever will. I always loved carved wood. Saw a lot of great articles in fine woodworking. I'd go to meetings at SAFM, Society of American Period Furniture Makers. There's a local chapter here. I'm going to actually have this table at their meeting in November. I'm going to talk about the carving of it. Today I'm going to talk about the project. In November I'll talk more about the carving of it. You can see thousands of YouTube videos. And this guy, Duché and Wolf Furniture Makers, is an absolute magician. And I'd watch his videos repeatedly, watched him carve a pie crust table, and I thought, that looks so easy. Mary May is a great resource. You can go online, she does tons, she posts a video every day, I think. She posts lots of videos. You can go online on her website and see lots of carving. It's not easy at first, but you can learn the skills, which I said before. So I'd seen a lot, but still didn't really know what I was going to make. Maybe I'll make a Newport chest. I always like Newport chests. I think they're pretty. You don't have to carve 3 shells, but more so, this chest has all sorts of complexity in terms of the rest of the chest. It's got some fancy feet. The bottom's got some complex molding. It's a great challenge, so I thought, well, maybe one day I'll learn to do that. And so I started thinking I'm going to do a Newport chest. And I started acquiring tools. If I'm going to carve, I have to have some tools to carve with. So I found some articles that were written by Al Breed and Mary May. I probably got Mary May's online from her website. Kind of a starter set of what size chisels you will need. And those X's are Al's recommendation for what you need to carve a Newport chest or a ball and claw foot. Mary had a list of starters, and then the acanthus leaf. So I probably collected 30 or 40, or maybe 30 or so, with the idea that maybe one day I'll start carving, because you got to have tools, so I can't start until I get some tools. So I went and started getting some tools, and I've gotten a lot more since then. And my problem was, now I got these tools, I still don't know where to start. I think the best way you can do that is take a class, and by happenstance, that's exactly what I did. Go take a class, take a workshop of a project you want to do, and you will learn so much, and it will give you the encouragement to go do it. Al Breed came to town, and that was probably the most important step for me. Al Breed's a very famous carver. He's made every kind of furniture you can make. He's probably carved, he's carved hundreds and hundreds of ball and claw feet. I'll show you one of those in a minute. And I read his article in Fine Woodworking a few years ago, I think this was 2019 maybe, on carving a ball and claw foot. And I just looked at the picture of these ball and claw feet at the top and thought, that's just absolutely incredible. I wish I could do that. And he came to Atlanta. Our staffing group had a meeting at Woodcraft, and he came and demonstrated how to do that as well as other things. He knocked out a ball and claw foot in maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And he just go bang, 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 and huge chips fly, and suddenly he stops, and it's a ball and claw foot. Now, it wasn't refined and scraped down and everything else, but it was a ball and claw foot. And he made it look so easy. And he held a workshop, and so I said, well, if I'm ever going to learn to carve, and now's my chance. And so the workshop was, he stayed an extra day, and you could carve whatever you wanted to carve. So I decided to carve a shell. And this is my first shell, my first attempt to carve. I'll pass this around. And it's not that uniform. If you look at it in the raking light, you'll see lots of facets, but that was my first attempt to carve a shell. And then I did 2 more shells. So I did that one, and it looked kind of like a shell. Turns out on shells, the most difficult part you'll see when it comes around are these little fillets that run around. They're supposed to be straight and supposed to be uniform. That's hard to do. So I did a second one, and this is better than the first one, and I put a color on it, and I really wasn't happy with that color. I was already thinking about what color I would have when I made my Newport chest. So I started scraping off the finish to see if I could get it scraped off, and then I got distracted doing something else, but that was my second attempt. And this is my third attempt, and that looks more shellish. There's still plenty of things you could do better on this, but they have some uniformity to it. Well, on a Newport chest, you need 2 outside shells and you need an inside shell. So I was getting close enough, I figured, well, I could probably make a couple of those shells. So there's also one of these that goes in the middle. And I thought this was actually a little easier to carve. I don't know why. Maybe I was just getting more accustomed to the shape. But so I felt pretty good about that one.
Yeah, how do you keep your depth universal throughout the project?
I decide how deep I'm going to carve it, and I'll set one, that's my guide, and then I'll literally measure all the way around the table. So I'm measuring, if you notice on the full-size example went around, all those cove cuts have a width, so I'm marking a line. I don't want to go past this line, and the depth I'm actually measuring either by eye, looking at the gouge, or with a ruler, measuring the depth of it. You can't see it. I'll pass this leg around in a minute, but literally rulers as well as I. So Al came to town, and I carved a couple more shells. And by the time I'd done a couple of shells, I'd had about enough for the shell game. No pun intended. It just wasn't that exciting. It's very repetitious, the same sort of thing over and over again. You're doing all these different veins all around, and I wasn't that thrilled with shells anymore, and they were hard to do them well, that uniformity of that filling. You can get there, but you end up having to scrape and file. Now, Al will tell you, the way Al will do it, he'll tell you, the way you do it is that last pass, just make one last pass and make a smooth, long cut all the way over, and that makes these fillets form perfectly. Well, I don't have the ability or the hand strength to do that. Al can do it all day. For me, I have to get the files out and make them uniform. But I wasn't that thrilled with it anymore. And I didn't want to make just a box of drawers. So I thought, what am I going to do next? So I thought, well, I'm still not sure I can carve. So let me see if I can carve Al's ball and claw foot. And that's what this is. I'll pass this around. This was that in fine woodworking, the picture you saw a couple of pages ago. And I thought, if I can do this, which is very different from shells, then maybe I can do something more complicated. And this looked ragged along the way, but it came out looking like a ball and claw foot, so I was pretty happy with it in the end. It's the only one I've got. I don't have 3 others to make it go on something, so maybe one day I'll make 3 more ball and claw feet. So my confidence was rising. And then I saw something that really caught my eye. This was an article in Fine Woodworking about Bill Pavlik talking about carving the top to this table. That's the table I built. And I thought this was just beautiful. And it reminded me, I went back and read the previous article I'd seen before about the Robert Walker table. And I looked at this article 10, 20 times. Just admiring it and thought, boy, I wish I could do that. Knowing I never would. It's just a pretty thing, but I wish I could do that. And then a year later, it shows up again in the Saffin Pins and Tails magazine. This is the full table. Now, it's a little different. Jeff Justice's table is a little different in terms of the feet and the pedestal. But I was fascinated by it, so I thought, you know, it's just destiny. I'm going to make this. And then I saw one, and this was the final key for me. Jay Stallman made one and brought it to the Saffin meeting as a show. He talked about it a little bit. And his pedestal's different, the legs are different, but the top's the top. And I thought, and Jay's a brilliant furniture maker, but I thought, if Jay can do this, and I've got enough courage to jump in and try it. So that was the final straw that pushed me to trying this. But I want to make a different table. This pedestal is different, the feet are different, the feet are wider, they're taller. It's that majesty I like about it. So what do I do about that? Well, you go do some research. So now I decided what I'm going to make. So now I'm going to research, how do you make it? Well, who can tell me about it? Jay Stallman can. Jay just made a table. So I talked to Jay. Jay, how'd you do this? What materials did you get? And again, YouTube's an incredible source. You can talk to the people you see on YouTube. They answer the phone. They will respond on email. Don't be shy about doing that. Where can I see plans or sketches? Ask the same people. If you got plans, I can go, you know where I can get plans. What materials? In this case, I was going to make it out of mahogany. I didn't have I had some of it, but I didn't have all that I was going to need. And what tools you'll need? Asked Jay again. and also from the other articles I had some idea, but Jay was my starting source for a lot of the stuff I got. For you, the two of the best resources are in this room, in this guild, and with SAFM. Most of what I know today that enabled me to do this, I learned from people here and in SAFM. Just talking to them, seeing the work they do, asking them questions about how'd you finish that and how'd you make that. SAFM is an incredible organization, and on top of that, they have an online website that has plans and illustrations and things of things that are made. Large library of articles. But the big thing is both groups have a large group of people who are willing to help you learn. So if there's something you want to make, just start asking around. Does anybody made one of these? I'm quite sure there's somebody in the guild that's probably made most everything you can come up with, or in SAFM between the two of them. That's one of the first places you ought to go to if you want to make something. And it doesn't have to be a piece of furniture. It may be a breadboard. It may be it may be a decorative box or something. It can be big or small. There are people in these groups who know about it. Today, different from 5 or 6 years ago, one of the first places I go to is an AI resource, ChatGPT or Google Gemini. That's an incredible resource. Who makes pie crust tables? I haven't Googled that lately, but I bet you go in there, I'll get probably 10 hits or 10 pieces of information, and you can do a whole conversation and just continue the conversation. Well, where did he make it? When did he make it? Can I find a picture of it? Who's got plans of it? It's an incredible resource. YouTube, I mentioned already, have great tutorials. You can buy books. I bought this book, Making a Pie Crust Tea Table by Tom Heller and Ron Clarkson. Incredibly valuable resource. And you can buy other books like this to make lots of different pieces of furniture. And while they had so many pages of illustrations of how you carve this and how you carve that, and while you get the idea. There are a lot of pictures, and some of them are in color, some of them black and white, a lot of it black and white, how you lay the table out. And even though the design of the legs and pedestal is different, even the top is different, the core skills are all described in here. I've referenced this hundreds of times, especially things like how do you attach the legs to the pedestal, how do you make it fit? Just an incredibly valuable resource. And there are plenty of other books like that for most any project you want to make. Libraries everywhere, museums, research museums. Winterthur, Mesner are both museums have tons of resources available. You can get most of them online. You can go visit in person and get them. You can go to Winterthur. Jim's done this. You go to Winterthur to measure a piece of furniture. You can get tons and tons of information from these groups. I mentioned earlier I bought this book. And for all this stuff, I wanted hard copies of research materials. I didn't want to just be able to see it online and know it's there. I needed to have something so when I'm in the shop working on it, I could turn to page 42 and say, how do you do that? And then when I forget that, come back an hour later and say, how did you do that? And I wanted hard copy in front of me, hard copy materials. I wanted hard copy plans. The two articles in Fine Woodworking from Bill Pavlik and Jeff Justice, they were sitting, the whole articles were sitting on my my bench top for a year. Jay Stallman called Jeff Justice, and he got a lot of information from Jeff, who written the article, and I got that from Jay. And importantly, Jay had access to some photos of a plan. I didn't have a plan for the Robert Walker table. I guess I could have asked Bill Pavlik, but I wanted to do something different. So Bob Baker, who's also a member of SAFM, had some photos of plans. I'll show you those in a minute. And I looked up some pictures from Mesda. So I had this. I got photos of drawings. They weren't to scale. So I got all this stuff in 2 dimensions. And that thing on the upper right is this part of the pedestal. And you can appreciate how challenging that is. That's just 2 dimensions, and 2 dimensions don't quite give you all the detail. I didn't mean to put that down. I can leave it standing up there. I'll talk about that more in a minute. That's my practice piece. And one very valuable thing in the bottom left, I don't forgotten who did the picture, but somebody measured the heights of these things on these sections as they go across. So it gave me some sense of how deep these things were supposed to be. That was the only three-dimensional metric I had. And I had some more. This is kind of faint, actually had good lines, but that's the leg. I'll pass that around in a minute, but a picture that way and a picture that way. And the foot, all in 2 dimensions. You can't see that, but you get the idea. The pedestal in 2 dimensions, and that was the top. So I got all these drawings in 2 dimensions, so I understand the length and width. Oh, and I had some good, I had some pictures from Mazda. The difficulty is when you can see on this picture on the left, when you blow this up to be able to see the detail, you lose it because it gets blurry. So you have to get close as you can and still see some detail, which really wasn't close enough for some of these things. So that's what I had. That was the material I had to go with. So some grainy photos, some photos that really didn't show a lot of detail. I didn't have any sense of the carving depths. No good view of how these pieces at the top overlaid. But a better picture than later. The Clarkson book was great on detail, but again, my table was different, so I couldn't just follow the Clarkson plan. And the other thing was the original Robert Walker table had this pedestal, then had a flat 1-inch square piece of wood, probably 9 or 12 inches length and width, 1 inch thick, that sat on a square pegged tenon. And that's what the top rests on. And I was going down the road working on this, on the drawings, and I kept looking at that picture, and I thought that's the weak point in this design. It's only held on by this tenon with a wedge in it. And it probably would have been okay in my house. Nobody touches the table, it sits over in a corner. But if somebody came and leaned on it hard a couple of times, I could see that giving way or something. So Dad, if it wasn't complex enough already, I decided I'm going to put a bird cage on this. And a bird cage is that little 4-corner post on the top of it that the whole top sits on. And it sits over this rod that you turn your lathe. And it's very, very strong. So I decided, while I had some photographs and some dimensional information about the Robert Walker table, I couldn't use that because I was changing the vertical dimensions. So this used to be this tall, this part was this tall, so all my dimensions were going to be different by the time I finished all that. So now that I decided what I want, I need some drawings. I've got photos of drawings, and I don't really have a good source of drawings. Because, again, my table is even more different than Robert Walker because I've just changed the vertical design. So you need a set of plans. You can get those from other people who made them. Well, Jay made this, but he didn't make the same table for me. And I didn't have anybody else in staff I knew at the time we had him. But you can go to those people for plans with some things. There are plenty of online resources and books. And if you can't do that, you've got to draw your own. And that's what I decided to do. And for me, I like drawing. And for me, it helps me learn more about what I'm trying to do. So I made a drafting table. My drafting table is a 3 by 5 foot piece of hardboard clamped on top of my workbench. In that top left corner, actually both end corners are square. So I got I think it's a 30-inch T-square that I ran on the end, and I could run it on top and bottom if I needed to for some things. And I drew a whole set of plans. And there you can see that's the top, mostly drawn there at the top of it. And the way I did it is that back on those photographs, I had a photograph of this segment. Can you see that, Gary? So if you remember back in those photographs, there was pictures of something like this. So I think what I did, I think I took that image, I copied it and took it over into a paint program, and then I copied it over in the PowerPoint or something. And then when you draw this table, it's a 30-inch circle, and you divide it into 8 segments. So I had registration lines from those 8 segments, and you divide each of those 8 in half to find the center points of those. I knew what the end-to-end dimension was going to be, so on my computer I kept stretching and pulling to make this dimension match what was going to be on my pattern. And when I got there, I printed that, and that became the pattern that I'd use to go around the top, all the way around the top. And by the way, after I drew those, I had a print service make photocopy sets. I also had an electronic set made. So if you want to make the table, I'd be glad to give you the PDF of it. So I've got it electronically. This is hard to see, but the other thing I did was once I got the full scale drawn, I went around and figured out everywhere around the table what size gouge you need at every point. So as you can, and this pattern repeats itself 8 times around the table. So this is a 320 gouge. It runs from here to here, then it becomes a 520. This is a 710, and I made little mark lines here. Then it becomes a 714, becomes a 514. So that when I went to cut this, I went around the table and made a slight impression, so I could make them all the same. So I detailed what size gouge I was going to use everywhere. And that's the templates I made. And that's how I was just describing. And then what I did, I make a set of these. There's supposed to be 4 here, but anyway. So that for each one of these, I cut out what I needed to cut out so that, and I think over 4, 1, 2, I think I'm missing 3 here. So it took me 4 patterns where I cut away part of it, and with those 4 patterns, I could draw every line on this by putting it on the registration line on my piece of wood and tracing that line. And it's like doing a screen print on top of a screen print. Then that's the next registration, and that's the next registration. So those became the templates I used to actually put the pattern on paper, and that was rough on paper. I then had to come back with French curve and circle templates and elliptical templates to smooth those lines out to give me a clean look of my drawing. That's how I actually got to the drawing. Pedestal was a real problem. That was easier to do these templates on the flat because it lays flat. This is what looks like after you turn it on the lathe. Looks like, this is just 2 of the, I carved one on top of the other. That's what it looks like after you carve it. And it's very hard to get a piece of paper up there and roll that in a hyperbolic position. There are different ways you can use to transfer images. One of the popular ways is a piece of material that you punch holes in that has your line marks, and you lay it up here. But because this isn't just a round, it's round, and it's a hyperbola. What I ended up doing, go back to the slides. At the top left, that's the pattern. I cut slits across this thing, and I knew I could see the lines, and I basically tried to hold it up here and mark at those gaps where each line was. And then when took that away, and then freehand connected the dots, if you would. That's how I got to it. The bottom one, that's the repeating pattern, and it registers, what, 3 times? I think it registers 3 times around that. So I divided it, so I set those lines and then centered that, and that gave me that hollowed out section, and I could almost hold that down and get it roughly where it goes. That was really hard to do, and I struggled with that. And at the end of the day, I finally freehanded it. I'd measure, go around and measure one, measure the next one, and check the ball to make sure it fit. Again, drawings were a guide. I didn't have any three-dimensional view yet. Tools, I had a lot of things I'd collected already. I added some more lists. Somewhere, I've forgotten where this came from. I had a list for what you needed to make the Walker table, and I got some more chisels from that. I had lathe tools already because you have to turn this pedestal. And other than that, it's a table saw and chop saw. Scrapers, most valuable tool probably in the whole project. So these are the scrapers I used.
Did you make any of them?
Yes. This is your standard scraper that you can buy, and I use that a lot too. Getting the top flat. Getting the top flat was really hard. When you carve that edge, around the top, you then got to get flat. So I have a ruler, 24-inch ruler. I kept laying in the center all the way around the table to make sure it's flat across. I almost never got the edge low enough. You cut out, and I finally ended up getting some chiseled and getting in deeper, and finally got it flattish. It's mostly flat. But this scrape I used a lot, but these little ones I used on the flat, I used on the curves. And I think I got a picture of that coming up here. You also need planes to flatten, and you need rulers to measure flatness, I just mentioned. That's the ones I just showed you. And actually, the one on the far left, I probably use more than any one of them. That little teeny one, it's only about a 1/4 inch across. But that's what I use to get into all the tight corners and even some flat areas. They're just the most valuable thing in the world.
John, is that, I noticed that the one on the left you're talking about, it looks like a very gentle, even from this angle, I can see it's very gentle curve.
The only, on that little, one on the left, the cutting edge is on the bottom and on the top, not on the side.
Rounded,
It's just a flat top and a flat bottom. And then the ones with the curves, obviously, the curve is what I'm using to, is the corners I'm using to scrape. And that scraper, the third one from the left, I was using, I think, all 4 edges on that one. And this is where they go.
Can you point out the cutting surfaces?
Yeah. If it's rounded, that's the cutting surface. And actually, I use this point, trying to get tight into an edge on this one. Stay there, Gary.
Okay.
On this one, can you see that? You stay and I'll move to you. You stay where you are. You stay there. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. This little tip I cut with. That little tip I cut with. And this square corner I'd use sometimes to get in a square corner.
Did you sharpen it like a scraper?
No. It's easier. And there's another scraper I've got. You have to see this one. There's a picture of this, so you don't have to do this one, Gary, but next slide or two. Go back to the slides a bit. A Stuart McDonald scraper. It's really thick. It's probably an 1/8 inch thick. You're not going to bend it. It has no flex to it at all. There it is, bottom right. I got one in 2 sizes. I think this may be the small one. The one is a little bit bigger. And to grind the Stuart McDonald scraper, you put it up on a grinding wheel. Put it on a flat plate on a grinding wheel. Just run it around the edge. And that's it. When I first made these, even the curved ones, I started sharpening the way you would sharpen a scraper, which is I'd flatten the surface and I'd come by with a burnisher and pull the edge down. Curved ones, I just put on the platform and just ran it around it. Created a huge burr. There's no question there was a burr there, and it did what I needed to do. It got things straight and smooth. Really easy to get an edge on it, and really easy to use. But this is really good for a flat area because it's so heavy. And it takes off a lot of meat at one time. And that's where you can see where I was using them. And I scraped these little coves all around the table. More scrapers being used. Lumber, I needed some lumber. I had a 3-inch square piece, 12-quarter, 3-inch square piece of mahogany longboard, which I used to make the legs. But to make the pedestal, you need a 4-inch square block of wood, 16-quarter piece of wood. And interestingly, I have some lumber I bought from a place in Mississippi that imports mahogany. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's a well-known place out of Mississippi. They'll ship it to you. So I called them to get a piece of 16-quarter mahogany. They said, we don't have any. Oh, that's too bad. I said, you know, and I do where I can get it. And he said, where do you live? Atlanta. Have you asked Carlton's? Carlton's is the wood place down on 14th Street. I think it's 14th Street. So I went down to see Mark at Carlton's, and yeah, they've got a beautiful piece of mahogany. This is what, matter of fact, the best piece of wood I had was a piece of 14-quarter, a 16-quarter I got from Carlton's. Absolutely spectacular wood. It's expensive. I can't remember what I paid for it, but it is expensive. But they had what I needed, so that's what I got. But what I did have were different pieces of wood from different trees. So I was going to have to make the color match. So plan to finish. By the way, I'll pass this leg around. This is pretty much a finished leg, I believe. So I wanted this to be dark. And I had done, about a year before this project, we had again, I learned from Saffron, I guess it was a Saffron meeting, maybe it was a guild meeting when I'm finishing, I think it was a guild meeting on finishing. And Marianne Smith and John Ogilvy came and talked about shellac, putting on shellac, and particularly about pore filling. And John brought with him a bunch of samples they'd made to illustrate it, and I thought, that's a good idea. So I went home and made about 25 samples of finishes with different kind of stains, different kind of fillers. I tried some with alcohol-only finishes, some with water-based dyes, some with oil-based dyes. So I had a collection of these. And when I started this project, this is linseed oil. Probably can't see that very well. No, you can't. Anyway, this is linseed oil. That was the best looking finish. And I just love the look of it. But linseed oil is a real pain to put on. If you put it down, you've got to be fast. If you swirl it on, if you step away for 45 seconds even and come back, it's got an edge on it already, and you have to work like hell to get it out again. But it's a beautiful finish, but I didn't want to work that hard on it. So I came up with something else. So I found a color. You probably can't see this back there, but I made one that was using a different kind of finish that was pretty close to that. Now, I even changed it, made the color even darker after this experiment. But let's go back to the slides. So linseed was what I wanted to use. But I had talked to Tom Melcher. Again, I was talking to somebody in the guild, and Tom was going on about how he'd been using these water-based dye stains. And he got it from Rob Kozman or somebody. And I thought, well, I'll try that. And that's what I ended up using. A mix of orange and brown General Finishes water-based dye, 1 to 4 or something, I forgot what it was. And that's where I finally got the color I wanted. Somewhere here, oh, here's a leg. When you cut it out, you cut this out on a bandsaw, and then you rasp the shoulders over, and you rasp more of it. But this is what it looks like when you cut it off on a bandsaw. That's where you start with. And this was a sample I was using to try to practice on that top. And you still have to cut more away after that, but you get the idea. And I cut that by just gluing a pattern off my print onto the wood and cutting it out. So I did some practice finishing. And here's when I just gouged out some pieces, and I didn't write down what this finish was. But that's pretty close to what the table is, I think. Tried to get to something I thought would make me happy.
So does your linseed oil darken with time?
I think almost everything darkens somewhat over time. Does anybody know, does linseed oil get dark over time? I think it does. I know it does because you've seen some linseed pieces that are almost black today. It does get darker in time, yeah. But I don't think this will get darker other than the fact that mahogany itself, underlying mahogany, will get darker, so I'll probably be dead by then, though, before it gets that dark. So I tried different colors, water and alcohol bases. I tried different application methods. I'd rub it on, I'd brush it on. But I kept experimenting until I found something that I thought worked for me. So now I've got a set of plans. I've kind of figured out the color I'm going to finish this in. And I like to think about that before I actually make the piece. I like to think ahead. I'm going to finish it with this kind of finish so I can be conscious of that when I'm putting it on glue or other things. In this case, the only assembly part is the legs. That is the only glue part. I'm using high glue. And high glue, I love working with high glue. I find it easy to use, and it will not mess up a finish. As long as you...
I'm sorry, I didn't agree. When you say color, we're talking stain or transient dyes or...
I tried transient dyes. I tried oil-based stains. I tried water-based stains. What I ended up using, I think it shows up a little bit later, is a trans-tint honey amber base, which is kind of a yellow color. I covered it with that. Then I used a mixture of orange and brown General Finishes dye. That way I give it a brown tone. Covered that on it. And then I put a filler on it. The filler is an Old Masters filler with, I think it was mahogany, General Finishes mahogany oil-based stains. So each application was a different kind of material, so I didn't get running from one to the next. And then you scrape off the General Finishes, or the Old Masters filler, and then shellac on top of that. So that was the finishing sequence I used to get to the end of it. So I've got this plan now. I've got some wood. I've got some plans, but I still don't know how to make this thing. I've never done this before. So I've got to do some lathe turning. I got to learn to carve on the flat. I got to carve on curves. There's a sliding dovetail that these legs attached to the leg, and there's a brass spider underneath. I'll show you what that is in a few minutes. So my first sample, I think, is in the trash somewhere. Oh, actually, this might be my first sample. Yeah, it is. And when I did I made some samples. Again, I'm still trying to convince myself I can do this. And one of the things I was looking to do is when I make a mistake, because I know I'm going to make them, what do I do about it? How I fix it? And in the course of these samples, I made at least 3 mistakes, major mistakes. One of them was these mahogany is easy to carve, but it also will chip out if you're not careful. And I have carved one of these coves, and a big chunk chipped out. Well, common practice when you're carving is if you messed it up, carve deeper, and just make a subtle transition and cover up the mistake. There was another place where I had a significant mess up, and I said, well, what if I glued a block in? So I just chopped a square out, found a piece of matching grain, glued it in, and then recarved it. And that's actually in this sample piece. You can see it on the end. You can see the glue. And from the top, it's not the perfect thing in the world, but it covered pretty good. And I made another mistake in that first piece I passed around, the actual big piece, and I can't remember what it was. But this was my first effort to do one to see what it would look like. And again, I wasn't worried about trying to get all it scraped smooth. I was just trying to see if I could get the shapes. And something important, you may or may not know this, but these two volutes are not the same. And what I learned when I did the sample was I drew these lines in pencil on the wood. And first of all, mahogany is kind of a rough surface, even when you get it down smooth. And the pencil line isn't particularly thin. You've got to make it wide enough so you can see it. And the first time I did this, I'd go to the end of where I think this line is and put the corner of my chisel and set it and go. I was never in the right place. And this time I'd be 32nd off this way, that time 32nd off. And so these volutes were different sizes. So I thought, I got to fix that when I do this thing for real. So that's the first sample. I think this is my second sample, and I just talked to you about mistakes. And when I did the second sample, I thought, I think I can do this. I learned how to set the gouges, and I learned on the big volutes up there, these and these and these. After these practice ones, I learned I have to set that point exactly. And so I used a little small pointer and made a little point where all those were, so I'd always start at the right place. And again, going back to the pattern, all these volutes have a pattern of gouges, and I went around and just lightly set the edges of all these lines. On the first time I did that, on these carve-out sections, the troughs here, little coves there, I also set those with a chisel, and that was a mistake, because those aren't hard edges. I would only do that now on the edge. It's actually firm and goes down. On those, I learned you got to put a pencil line and then use a gouge, a scooping gouge, and just come to the line. You'll see on that sample that's going around now, on the coves, there are actually edges. So this one, you can see that the line edges where I formed a line with a gouge, and it makes a mess of it, so I quit doing that. So I'm practicing to learn. So I learned where to keep these edges short and where to let them be more subtle. The big thing, I think I've said it before in carving, is how do you handle the grain? And that once you get a handle on that, you can do a lot of things. This is where I was setting the templates on the board. The segment lines with the registration, that's what I was describing earlier. You just draw the lines, put on the next pattern, draw the line. This is the bigger sample. That's the one that you saw earlier where I passed around. And as I said, getting the bottom flat is really important. And that's hard to do. Getting the top back of this thing flat was easy. There's no edge. I can just scrape right off the edge of the table. But that inside, there's always this wall around it. And trying to get a scraper right up to the edge is really tough. I told you about that. By the way, when I colored and finished, I shellacked finished, I brushed it on, I French polished some, I sanded, and I didn't like it. And I took all the finish off and started again. I like working with shellac because you can do that with shellac. You can't do that with polyurethane. If you put it on, if it had been polyurethane, I never would have gotten it off because you have to sand it off. But shellac, I took the complete finish off and started all over to get that sample I passed around earlier, the big sample. And then make it. So here I am, no time like the present, so let's go make that. And the board, I think, was about 1.5 inches thick, and I think I took about, what is it? Maybe goes, I took at least 1/4 inch off of it.
What is it, 6/4?
It might be, yeah. I don't have a planer that big, so there's only one way to get it down. It's hand planes. So I planed for about a week on this thing. Number one, because it's hard to do. Although mahogany planes pretty well. And the other thing was I didn't want to take it off all at one time. So I took some off the top, some off the bottom, and let it rest a day or two. Then came back, took some more off. And I made about 3 or 4 passes to finally get it down to my final dimension. I was afraid it would warp on me a little bit, so I went at it easy. I put the outline on the wood. This is where I use gouges. You can see those lines. That's where I put gouges in to set those edges. And the other thing this did for me, this allowed me to have consistency. So every volute of a certain position is the same, identical around the table. So you didn't look at the table and say that volute's bigger than this one, that one's bigger than this. They were all the same. And that's the table. I kept this board intact. I didn't cut out the ring first and carve it. I carved the ring onto the rectangular board because I could then clamp that to my table while I was carving. It gave me a lot of firmness to hold it in place. I don't know how I would have held it otherwise. And I've talked about it already. The infield has to be flat. Right here, this line right here, there's a grain line of dark wood. I kept thinking I was going to drop this table and crack it right along. I knew that was a weak spot. And I kept seeing myself, because you're picking this up and turning it all the time. I figured one day I was going to drop it and that whole thing was going to crack. But it never did, fortunately.
So you stand on top of it?
Pardon?
How do you get on top of it?
My workbench is about this high, and I work from this side, and I walk around the bench, work from the other side. I can get almost all the way across it. My workbench, I think, is 30 across, and so I can get almost all the way across it, but I most often would walk around, or I'd turn the thing around so I could do the other side. Repairs. This is what I practiced earlier. It's hard to see in this picture here, but these volutes have grain line runs across. That edge is incredibly fragile. I think I broke off 5 or something like that on these volutes. And I thought I'd figure out how to do it like you do. Leave the back support here before you carve away, do the side, set that one, and then do this last. But even when I started doing that, I broke off 1 or 2. It seems inevitable. And so what I did, I glued on a piece of scrap wood. You can see there's a piece of scrap there, a piece of scrap here. Then I planed it down. That's when I planed down. And then I just got to come back with my gouge and clamp the edge. And they're invisible when you do that. And I glued it down with high glue. Again, high glue becomes invisible when you do a finish like that. So again, don't be afraid of doing a project that's complex. Just have some idea what you might do when you create those problems. And on the board, the repair pieces, this is the original piece this came from. And somewhere here, there's some on the other side. That's why you can't see them. So this is in its full form, and I'm cutting these volutes here, and I crack one off. So I cracked off a volute right here, and I cracked off one right here. So I came on the same grain line and chipped out a little wedge on the edge of the board here, and that became my repair piece. So I'm picking the same grain to match that goes in there. And there's one up there too. So there's at least, I think that's a double. I think there's 4 or 5 though that I ended up happening. Broke it again. Yeah. When doing something that's really got to be flat, you really need a raking light. When this thing is in its raw form, it looks completely smooth. It's not. And a raking light will help you find all those things. I protected the wood by putting a silicone pad under the table, and on the top, I didn't mean to do that. On the top, I put a piece of cardboard inside so that when I was carving these edges, I learned when I was doing the practice ones, I'd come off the edge and hit the wood. So that piece of cardboard here gave me some protection. When I slid off the edge here with a chisel, I had something to catch it. This is the hardest thing to do. I had these, going back, I had these 2-dimensional pictures, looking from the side, looking at the top. I could not figure out what this thing was. And that leg that's going around has this carved on it. And all I had, but so when I copied the lines and put it on the wood, and I just started practicing. So I made 2 or 3 of these, which are first versions of that, same sort of thing as that leg going around, trying to figure out, and I finally figured out you have to carve a little cove into that. And when I finally did that and said, oh yes, that looks like the picture, but I struggled trying to understand what that looked like. Legs, when I did legs, I did them one element at a time. So I'd cut the big toe out and do all four. Oh, by the way, I only need 3 legs, make an extra leg, because you might screw one up a long time. So if you need 4 legs for a table, make 5. But you do one element at a time on each leg, and that way you can check the dimensions and make sure the width of the legs are the same and the length of the toes are the same, all that sort of thing. I practice the pedestal carving. You have to pass this fast because I'm going to run out of time here in a second. This is me practicing pedestal carving. There's 2 different efforts at it. And again, that, I forgot what you call that at the top, gator or something like that. That was a struggle. Again, trying to understand what the picture was trying to tell me until I finally got something that looked like the picture. And the dovetail, I practiced this dovetail that attaches to the legs. I think I was telling someone earlier that first dovetail I cut was crooked because you cut it in the leg with a router, and the router got twisted. So the tenon or the dovetail is twisted on it. So you have to make sure this is square to the leg. And then you assemble. I'm going to race through the last of these. Hide glue clamps and rubber bands held this together. This is the spider. Up here is a spider, is the brace you put on the bottom. I made it because Jay made one. Jay Salman made one. I don't think you need it on this table. It's not going to be holding load, but it's an extra safety thing. That's about an 1/8-inch thick piece of brass. I just bought a piece of raw brass. I cut it on my scroll saw and used sandpaper to polish it and clean up the edges. And this is the symbol. This is when you put it together. And it looks perfectly smooth at this point, but you still have to go back and clean it up. I scraped it all and then sanded with 320 grit paper lightly, and that's all the sanding I did to it. And the finish, I think I talked about this before, honey amber, 1 to 10. Somebody was asking me earlier, that's what I use, dye to alcohol. General finish, water-based dye, filler, 13 coats of shellac, foam brush on the back. A good quality foam brush goes down beautifully, just back and forth. I use this Taklon brush to the top. I really like that a lot. 13 coats. And what you do is you put on a few coats and then sand it back with 600 grit paper. The edges I sanded. I took that down with a non-abrasive cloth to get that smooth. I only took about maybe 4 coats on the carved parts, but 13 coats on the field. And on the legs, only 3 or 4 coats. You put on enough shellac until it doesn't need to shine anymore. But when I got to this point, it was still a lot of grain showing. So I French polished to build up layers, and finally I got it up to more thickness of shellac to make it smooth.
How did you know 13 was right?
Because the finish was not improving when I put another coat on. You keep putting coats on until the finish looks complete.
So on the top, you use the brush all the way?
Yeah, brush. I did the field and the perimeter on the top. Then you wax it. TLC wax, TLC brown, mahogany brown wax I put on here. Then I let it sit for a couple months without anything on it. That's it.